right, then let me share my screen also. All right, so good day once again. So we are welcome to today's session, which would be about functions and GTOP. Yeah, so before we start, I was actually expecting a much larger class, but regardless, I think we move, right? Because this is just two persons online. I'm seeing myself twice. So, with myself twice, that's like four of us in the group. So but we can't just keep waiting. So I think we just have to start, right? So, once again, you are welcome to today's session, right? So we are going to be treating functions and GTOP. So since this is like a very small class, so if at any point you stopped hearing me or you stopped seeing my screen, please, you can just unmute and let me know so I could, quickly fix whatever the issue is. But then I'm banking on, or let me say, I'm hoping the elephant in the room, which is the network, it won't fail me today, right? So hopefully everything goes well, then we can finish on time. All right, so I want to move to my VS Code right away, then we'll get started, right? So I'm actually inside my VS Code. So please, if you can see my VS Code still, please just unmute and let me know so we can start. If you can
Yes, sir.
see my VS Code. All right, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
All right, so as I said, today's class is going to be about functions and GTOP. So I think we are going to start from functions, then we'll move to GTOP later on. Let me enable autosave because sometimes I just forget I need to do Control S. So all right, so we are going to start with functions, right? So if you could remember, in the bootcamp, we just lightly touched on what functions are. So we said functions are just like your block of code that does a specific task. So block of code is just like some number of codes. It doesn't have to be like maybe 20,000 or 10,000. It could be one or two. It's just some block of code or some codes that does a specific task, right? So we saw some examples of functions, like the common one, which is the print, right? It's doing one particular task, which is to output something. We've seen the len function also, which is to count something, right? We've seen the int function, which is to cast something to an integer. We've seen maybe the str function, which is to cast something to a string. We've seen the input function, which is to take user input. So we have numerous functions like that. Lest I forget, I've created a new folder. I called it functions lesson, so you can do likewise also. Please always remember to basically just create folders for whatever it is you're doing, right? So at least everything you're doing can be arranged in one space, right? So I've created the folder. I called it functions lesson. Then I created a file main.py. So I'm going to be writing my codes inside main.py, right? So since this is done, let me just collapse this area so we can see everything entirely. All right, so we said all these ones are functions, block of code that does a specific task. This is doing a particular task. This is doing a particular task. The same way these other ones are also doing a particular task, right? So all we've been seeing so far, especially with all these ones, they are what we call your inbuilt functions, right? Inbuilt, basically follow com, right? So you follow Python. Right, so what we are going to be doing today is the user-defined functions. So we are going to learn how to create functions ourselves and how to use the functions ourselves, right? So going forward now, anytime you see a print, you should know that okay, this was created by some programmers, right? So there's a logic to this print that is making it work the way it is working, right? So that logic is what we are going to be creating for today, right? So then how then do you create functions? Or let me start from here by defining some keywords in functions. Are we still together, please? Mr. Shuaib, or let me, Mr. Habib. Are we still hearing me?
Ah,
Sorry, I didn't get that.
yes, sir.
All right. Also, for the other persons that are online, I don't just want to keep talking and talking, so it won't seem as if maybe I'm talking to myself. So if at any point you stopped hearing me, please unmute and let me know, please. All right. So I want to be going over some keywords. I'll start with def, then return, then parameter, then argument, right? So I'm going to be defining these four, right? So anytime you hear or you see a def keyword in Python, it means you are creating a function, right? It means you are creating a function, or you could say you are defining a function. That is what the def keywords mean, right? Return means you are outputting a result inside a function. Then you are also exiting that function. So your return keyword is doing two things. It is outputting a value from a function, and it is also exiting that function. Then parameter are what you pass inside the function when creating the function, right? So parameters are what you pass inside your function when you are creating the function, but your arguments are what you pass inside the function when using the function. So these are just what these keywords mean. Def, when you're creating a function, you are defining that function. The return keyword, when you are basically you outputting a result from a function, and also it's exiting that function. Then parameter, these are your placeholders you pass inside your function where you are creating those functions, right? Then the arguments are what you pass inside that function at the point where you're using those functions, right? So I just thought to explain these four keywords. So going forward now, I'll keep mentioning these keywords at intervals, right? So so now let's see how we can create functions for ourselves, right? So imagine we want to create a function that adds any two numbers together. Whenever you're dealing with functions, especially user-defined functions, reason is very, very important. The reason why you're creating that function, right? Because the logic for that function would be covered in the reason why that function is being created. The reason for print is so you can output something. The reason for len is so you can count something. So the reason is very important, right? So imagine I want to create a function that adds any two numbers together. The reason for me is the purpose for me now is to add two numbers together with that function. So you introduce your def keyword. Remember, you are defining that function. Then what comes after is the name of that function. Remember, user defined, you are the one creating it. So you give it whichever name you want. So since I want to create a function that adds two numbers, I can create something that depicts what I want to do. So I could say maybe add numbers, or I could even go further and say add two numbers, right? Then after the name of that function, you add your bracket, your circular bracket, then in front of it your colon, then enter. Then you notice that vertical arrangement or vertical alignment also that you've seen from your control flow and also your loops. So it means you shouldn't take this cursor to the left. The moment you do that, you are exiting that function, right? So you try as much as possible to maintain that vertical alignment, right? So what you type inside this space is what would happen when you call this function. So remember, the return keyword is used inside the function to output something and also to exit. So I'm just going to say return hello for now. right? So now here's the thing, most of us will be expecting, if I run this, you'll be expecting to see something in the terminal. You would not. Why? Because you've created a function, you've created a name of a child, but as you never born the child now, the name for that child is still undefined, right? It is until a child exists before you can attribute a name for it. So that's the same thing that is happening here. You have a name already for this function, you've created a logic, but until you call that particular function, nothing would work. So how do you call the function? Just by typing out the name of that function. So this in coding, we call it invoking that function or calling that function. I've created a function here, I am calling that function here. But now here's the thing, if I should run this also, nothing will work. Why? Because anytime you want to see the result of something in Python, you have to print, right? So what I need to do here is just to print this entire thing. So without printing, you won't output anything in Python, right? You can see we've created the function, we've invoked or called the function here. Now we are calling the result of this function that we've invoked here, right? So once we run it this time around, you can see it says hello, right? So basically how that works is, remember that your Pac-Man, once it is coming from here, it sees this block, it sees that you're creating a function that does something, which is to what? To just return hello. Then on line 14, it sees that first you are invoking that function here, then you are printing the result from that function, which is why it returned hello here, right? So this is just how to create a basic function in Python. You define it, you return some sort of values, then you invoke and you print that function, right? But remember, the function we created or the function we want to create should be able to add two numbers. That was the intention of, for us to create this function. We want to add two numbers. So how does it work? What we want is when anybody passes maybe first number, comma, second number inside our function should be able to add the two numbers together. So our function should be able to take the first one and add it with the second number. But now here's the thing, if I run this code as it is, we are going to get an error. So let me run it and see. You can see it says type error, add two numbers missing two required positional arguments, right? First num and second num. What it means is the number of parameters you have when you are creating the functions has to equate the number of parameters you're passing inside of it. When we created this function, the intention was to take any two numbers anybody passes. This one and this one, they don't matter. You can even use F and S to represent these two. They are just variable names, right? It means anybody that wants to use our function must pass in two numbers inside. So the reason why we are having that error is because nothing was passed inside this place. So what we can do is we can just say maybe 3,8. What this means is anytime anybody passes any two numbers, our function will take this first one to represent this first one, then this second one to represent this second one, then we are returning the addition of the first with the second one, which is why if I run it now, we are going to start getting what? 11. Why? Because addition of 3 and 8 is 11. Alright, so this is how you create your functions, and you pass in argument and parameters inside your function. Just always know that the key to how your function works depends on you that is creating the function. If you are saying my function has to take in 3 parameters, it means anybody that is using that function must pass in 3 parameters. It means this particular one now will throw an error. Why? Because this person is passing 2 parameters here, right? So what you have in here is depicting what users are passing in here. Yeah, so that is how it works, passing parameters inside a function. But then we can actually make this place cleaner by just saying maybe sum equals first num plus second num. So we are returning the sum instead, So this looks cleaner than the way it was before. Are we still together, please? Are we still together?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. So this is how to create a very basic function and how to pass in parameters in there. Yeah, one other important thing also, you must create your function first, or you must define your function first before you call the function. What I mean is, I can't do something like this. What this means is you are trying to call these add two numbers before your Pacman gets to where you created that function. You can see this thing in yellow, right? So if I run it, you can see it says name error, name add two numbers is not defined. Why? Because you are calling a function that has not been created yet. So you always define your function before you use, right? So that is how to create a function, right? So now let's see something else. Let's say maybe we want to create a function that asks users to type in their name, then returns a message that says maybe welcome Shegun, or whichever name they type, right? So basically you ask users to type in a name, and once they type in a name, you are returning welcome whichever name they type, right? So how do you create a function for that, right? Whenever you want to create your function, if I were you, I would learn how to create the skeleton of a function first before I can bring in the logic. What I mean by that is, this is what we want to create. I'll generate the skeleton. So what's the skeleton? First, create your def keyword, then decide on the name of that function. So maybe I want to call this function welcome user. Let's say this is what I want to call that function. Then remember, I'm just creating the skeleton, so I'm returning a string that says welcome Shegun. So this is what I want my function to display, right? So I have to invoke that function, or I want to call that function. So how do you call it? By typing in the name of that function. So welcome user, then this bracket. Then because you need to print your function, so I'll go ahead and print this, right? So if I run this as it is, I'm going to get welcome Shegun. But till Jesus comes, you always be getting welcome Shegun. But remember, we want to make this dynamic, right? What we want is whatever users type, it would say welcome that thing, right? So it means the logic of our function, we are expecting some form of a name, right? So you can go ahead and write that. So we are expecting a name. You can even say maybe n here instead of a name. You can say your name is just a placeholder, it's just a variable, right? But in this case, I'm going to say name. So what I want to generate also is maybe a sentence that says like an f string of welcome, then the name they type. Remember, f string, so you introduce your curly braces, then you pass in your variable, right? So it means our function can now return the sentence variable. But then this will return an error if you run it. Why? Because we created the logic of our function to receive a parameter. It means wherever anybody is using that function, they have to pass in an argument, right? So where is the argument coming from? You could just say maybe Shegun here, or we want to make it dynamic by saying we want users to type in the name, enter a name, then we want to store this inside a variable. So we want to say variable name equals to this. So it is that variable name that we are passing inside our function instead. So basically how it works is I've created a function that is accepting a placeholder or a parameter, then we are generating a sentence from that placeholder, then we are returning that sentence variable. Then here we are giving the users an option to type in a name. It is that name they type we are passing inside that function, right? So let me run this and see how it goes, right? You can see it says enter a name. I'll type in John, enter, you can see it says welcome John. Let me run it again. So this time around I'll say Shegun, then enter, you see it says welcome John. So this is how you can pass parameters inside a function. Are we still together, please? Are we still together, please?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. So that's how to pass parameters inside a function. All right, so now let's see how we can pass more than one parameters inside a function. Remember, I think we passed in more than one self. That first time that we did first number and second number. So this is one way of passing more than one parameter, right? So let's do another example. Let me see. All right, so let's say maybe we want users to type in, okay, so we want users to type in a word, or we want users to type in a name. Then we want to create a logic to check if the word or the name they type is all alphabets. So if it is all alphabet, we want to tell them welcome. If it is not all alphabet, we want to tell them you are not welcome, right? So that's basically what we want to generate. So let me create the skeleton, right? So def, so let's think of a name for this function. Maybe def greeting. Let me just call this greeting. Right. So what I want to return is, we want to say welcome, maybe Shegun, if what they type is all alphabet. But if it is not all alphabet, we want to tell them you are not welcome, right? So it means users can type in something here. So I'll say enter a word or name. Then I want to store this inside a variable, so let me call this word equals this. Then I want to invoke that function, so greeting. Then I want to pass in the word inside. Please mute, please, unless you have a question. Alright, so this is me invoking that function, but nothing would happen unless you print. So I want to go ahead and print this. So I am printing this function. Right, so this is how it works. Once users type in something, it is stored inside this word variable. Then we are passing that inside this function. So your Pacman will travel down again to where that function is. So it means we have to receive what they are typing here. So we can receive it with that word variable also. So now what we want to check is if what they type here is all alphabet. Remember, what they type there is a string, right? Remember, there are some string methods that we can use to check if something is alphabet, which is what? Dot is alpha, right? So it means just by saying word dot is alpha, this will tell if what they type is an alphabet or not, right? But because I want to create a logic, so what I can do is I can say if word dot is alpha, we want to here's what I'm going to do, because I want to return like a statement. So I can say maybe statement equals maybe an empty string for now, or there's no need to even declare this statement, right? You could just say if word dot is alpha equals this. We can add a statement, or you can even use results, whichever one you prefer, because that statement looks technical. So I'll just say result equals a string of I think we can use f string. So I'll turn this to an f string and say that name they type, so it will be word you are welcome. That is if what they type is alphabet. So what if it is not alphabet, which is else? So what if what they type is not alphabet? It means our results can now be equals to an F string also, but the word in this time around we are not saying you are not welcome, right? Then at the end of the day we want to return results. I know this might be confusing already, so let me take it again. What we are trying to create is a system where users will type in any word. Then our function should be able to check if what they type is all alphabet or it is not. So first and foremost, we gave users the option to type in something. We stored it inside a variable, then we are passing that variable inside this function. Then where we are creating the logic for that function, we are receiving what they type with the same variable as this one. Then if you still remember our string methods, we are saying, remember, anything that comes from an input is a string. So we are saying if the word dot is alpha, remember this will return boolean, true or false. So we are saying if the word they type is all alphabet, do this. But if it is not, then do this. Then at the end of the day, we want to return results. So now let me run this and see. So it says enter a word or name. So I'm going to enter Shegun, then enter. So you see it says, please let's mute unless you have a question for me. Khalil, mute yourself. He's laughing. You hear the guy. Alright, so I typed Shegun, then I ran the code. So it says Shegun, you are welcome. So now let me run it again. This time around, I won't type all alphabet. I want to add numbers. Then enter. You can see it says this number I typed or this text I typed, you are not welcome. So how did it work? I was able to collect whatever users typed, pass it inside the variable. Hey, please, unless you have a question, please let's mute. Remember, this session is being recorded. So if you don't mute and we keep getting this disturbance, that is what you are going to be hearing when you're watching the videos. Please. This one is refusing to mute. Mr. Tony Adebayo, please just mute yourself. I can't seem to be able to mute you from here. If you don't mute, I'm going to remove you. Please just mute yourself, please. Alright, so we've been able to get user input. We passed it inside our function. Then we received it here. Then we are checking if what they type is all alphabet. If it is, we print this. If it is not, then we do this instead, right? So this is how you can actually get if, or this is how you can actually pass in parameters inside your function, how you can even have sort of like a control flow inside your functions. All right, so moving on, your function can have more than one return value. Remember, what we've been doing so far is just one return value. Like in this case, we've been returning just one singular value, right? So how can you return more than one value? That is where we are going to next, right? So now let me comment all this. Then I'm going to create another regular function. So I'm going to call this one def. I'm thinking of a name for this function. Def show name, or let me say def show details, right? So what I want my function to output is your name is maybe Shegun. Then I also want the age. I also want Shegun's age to come after this sentence here. So basically what I want to output is this statement. Let me copy it out. What I want to output is this statement, then 70 as the age. So this statement, then the age. So it means we are going to be getting two things from the user. First, their name. Second, their age. Right? So this is just the skeleton of that function. Right? And remember, since we are going to be getting two things, the name and also the age, so we can just collect it straightforward. Right? So we can say name, comma, age, even though we have not used these two parameters yet. Right? So now let's go to creating the input. So we can say input, enter your name. That's the first thing there, right? So whatever name they type, we are storing it inside a name variable. Then after that, we want users to type in their age also. So enter your age, right? Then once this is done, we want to pass these two inside our function. So first we want to invoke our function. So we type the name of our function, then we pass the first one, which is this, then comma, we pass the second one, which is this. Then at the end of the day, we want to print everything. We are asking users to type in their name, to type in their age, then we are passing the name and the age inside our function. So what we want to do here is we want to return sort of like a combination of this variable and a string to generate a sentence that says your name is this and also the person's age. So what we can do instead is we can just create a variable that says maybe sentence equals maybe an f string, your name is named variable, right? So Python says you can pass this parameter in front of your return keyword. So if we do it this way, it will work, just that your function is returning only one value, which is this sentence. But Python says you can output more than one value. So how you do that is just by adding a comma, then you pass in another value. So what I'm trying to say now is my function is taking in two parameters and also my function is outputting two values, right? You can even output more than, can output something else, right? You can even output something else again, like another string, right? Just know that you keep separating everything with commas, but we are going to stop at 2, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm taking the name and age, I'm generating a sentence with that person's name, then I also want to output the person's age, right? But then there's a key difference between this and what we've been doing so far, which is what we are going to see once I run this code. So once I run it, it says enter your name, I'll say Shegun, enter your age, I'll say 70. You can see it says your name is Shegun, comma 70. What it means is anytime your function is outputting more than one value, those values will come as a tuple. That is basically what it means. Anytime your function is outputting more than one value, those values will come as a tuple. Just so you know, let me run a type on this so we can see that this is actually a tuple, right? So enter a name, Shegun, enter an age, 70. You can see it says class tuple. So what is coming from this particular function is a tuple. Why? Because Python sees it that anytime you're passing or your function is generating more than one value, it will always come as a tuple. Just have it at the back of your mind like so. Yeah. So this is how you can return more than one value in your functions. Are we still together, please? Are we still together, please? Are we still together?
Yes.
All right. So now let's see how we can, you know, passing more than one parameters inside our function. What I mean is, let me just create a normal function to add any two numbers together. What I mean by that is, say maybe we have a def add numbers, right? Then maybe the logic around this function is we want users to be able to just pass two numbers, not more than two numbers, right? So it means we can say maybe num1 comma num2, right? So we want to return num1 plus num2. That is basically what we want to do, right? So let me invoke these functions. So I'll do 3 comma 7. Then I want to print this. Yeah, so this is similar with what we've been doing so far, right? Where users can pass in more than one parameters in here. Why? Because the logic for this particular function was created to take in two parameters. But we are going to have some sort of errors if maybe somebody tries to pass in like 3 parameters here. Remember, the logic around this function is to take in 2 parameters. So another person now is trying to pass in 3 parameters inside this function. So now if I should try and run this, you can see there's an error here. It says add numbers takes 2 positional arguments, but 3 were given. So it means there would always be an error if somebody uses this function different from the logic we created for it. So now Python says there's a way you can manage something like this. There's a way you can handle something like this by using what we call arguments.
Manage.
Sorry, you said what? Are we still together, please? I thought somebody said something. So please, are we still together?
Yes, we're together, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, so Python says you can use what we call argument, args for short, right? So this is a way of, when you are creating a function, especially to perform some arithmetic operations, but you are uncertain as to how many parameters users will pass, right? Then you can use this particular method called asterisk args. So how it works is, instead of hand coding num1 comma num2 in here, what you can do instead is just to type in asterisk args, right? So now let me go ahead and return args here, right? Then we're going to compare what this line 52 returns and also what this line 53 would return, right? So let me run the code. So it says the first one 3 and 7. Remember, what was passed inside the first one was 3 and 7. Then the second one is returning 3, 7, and 8, which is what was passed in here. The reason why it looks like this is garbage in, garbage out is because we are not doing anything on that data. We are just receiving it with this. Then we are just returning it the same way it came into this function, right? So now imagine you want to add these numbers together. So what you can do is, maybe we can say sum equals, or we can say maybe summation, or we can even do results. So results equals, you still remember that our function to sum whatever it is you have inside a sequence, right? So if we say sum args, remember this args is storing everything that is coming from this place or everything that is coming from this place. So if we return results, like in this case, it should be able to perform the summation of this and also the summation of this, right? So let me try and run this. So for the first one, it says 10. Why? Because summation of 7 and 3 is 10. Then the second one, it says 18. This is 10 and what? 18. So anytime you're creating a function and you are unsure as to the number of parameters users might pass inside that function, and your code or your function can break if users pass in more than what you planned for, you can just use the asterisk args, right? And for those persons that are having that question that must it be args, it can be anything. It can even be asterisk a, right? But the reason why you see programmers use args is just because of the naming, the naming culture, right? It's just like a practice, right? It doesn't mean any other variables would not work, but the general way of passing more than one parameters inside a function is with this asterisk args, right? So that is how you can, accept more than one parameters in your function. And also, remember earlier when we said, your function could return more than one parameter. Like in this case, you could say return result or args. You could return something like this. It means the first one is going to be this result here, which is the summation of whatever it is they pass. Then this comma args here, I'm just returning whatever was passed in the function as it was, right? So one thing you can notice with this result is it is coming as a tuple, right? And we've learned how to get values from a tuple already. You could either use indexing or you could unpack the sequence. Remember in the bootcamp we said you can have something like, say, maybe x comma y equals, say, maybe 5 comma 9. So we said you can unpack 5 inside x and unpack 9 inside y. What that means is you can have maybe x equals to 5, then y equals to 9. Mathematically, this is possible, right? And mathematically, we agree that this is possible, right? So if you agree with this, it means we should also be able to unpack this sequence, this one, into two variables. What I mean is, I should be able to do something like, maybe I should be able to strip this and say, maybe first, comma, second equals to this. Let me comment this first. So it means if I print first, then below this I should be able to print second also, right? You can see first was what? 10, which is the addition of 3 and 7 inside this place, the result. That is the first one. Then comma the second one. So that second one is now the what? The return of that sequence, right? I know it can be confusing sometimes, but just know that anytime your function is returning more than one value, that function would always come as a tuple, right? So this is where the importance of the string methods, the tuple methods that we treated back then, will come in handy at this point, right? So we've already learned how to strip a tuple or how to unpack a sequence, right? So this is how you can pass in more than one argument inside a function. Are we still together, please? Sorry, can anybody just check how many minutes do we have left, please? I think it should be showing on your screen. How many minutes are you seeing there? Nobody wants to check for us. You said what?
14:48.
14 minutes?
No, I'm saying 2:48.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if we started 2 on the dot or we started some minutes
No,
before
we
2.
didn't.
So I think the moment you're seeing like 5 minutes more, please just let me know so I can know to round up, please. Once you're seeing 5 minutes more, just let me know, please.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry, sir,
So
what time are you closing? Are you closing 3?
no, immediately after the first 1 hour, you are going to wait for me in the group. I'm going to create another 1 hour. It's not just one session for today. We are going to be doing 2 sessions.
Okay.
Yeah. So the 3 is for the first 1 hour. Then we are going to go from 3 again to 4. Yes. So you still have. You want to go and watch Arsenal match, have you?
Yes.
No. He said yes. That one is. Ask your relative to record it for you now, so you can watch later.
Okay.
We have 15 minutes to
Yes. All right. So let's continue. All right. So this is how you can pass in more than one parameters inside your function, and also how you can return more than one value from your function. So now let's See, this one is like Jara. It's important. I won't really say it's important, right? But then it's just there. It's not mandatory. It just makes your code, your functions neat and clean, right? I don't know if you remember during the boot camp. Sometimes I'll say it is allowed to forget what a particular function does, right? Nobody has everything in their heads. But what I do most times is once I've written the name of a function, for instance, say maybe I write print. If you notice, then I will want to hover inside that particular print. Then I'll say something like I'm expecting like this box you're seeing here to pop up, right? This is like some sort of helper, right? So that is where we are going to next. How you can help yourself or other programmers to understand what your function is doing to avoid errors. For instance, you could have created a function to add two numbers. So what if I pick that same function and I'm trying to pass in 3, 4 numbers inside? It means we are going to have errors. So why not have like some sort of helper? So before I use that function, I could already see what is expected of me before using that function. Yeah. So that particular method or those processes are called type hints and doc strings. So that is where we are going to next, right? Type hints. So now how was something like that generated where the moment you hover on a function, it gives you, requirements for that function? That is where we are going to next. So now let me just create a general function that, returns the addition of two numbers, or say maybe the subtraction of two numbers. Or let's even do, since we'll be doing addition since, let's do multiplication, right? So we want to create a function that returns the multiplication of two numbers. So right, so I'm going to say def multiply. Is this the spelling of multiply? Okay, multiply number. Is it multiply number or multiply numbers? It's just English, right? So you can interpret it whichever way you want. But me, I'll just leave it as multiply number. Then I'm just going to return hello for now. Then, so what I want is anytime anybody types in two numbers, our function should be able to multiply the two numbers together, right? So now let me invoke that function. Then I'm going to pass in those two numbers. So I'll do 5 and 6. Then because nothing will show unless we print, so I'm going to wrap everything around a print function, right? So the moment you run this, you are going to get an error. Why? Because you are passing in two parameters, but where you created the logic for that function, you did not collect the two numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do num1, num2. So what I want to do here is I want to return num1 multiplied by num2, right? So the logic is basically users passing two numbers, then our function will take the first one and multiply it with the second one, right? So let me run this. You can see I'm passing 5 and 6. The multiplication of 5 and 6 is what? 30. So it means if anybody picks this same function and the person is passing maybe 150 or 159 by 60, our function should still be able to multiply the first number by the second number, which is why this is returning 9,540. Are we still together, please?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, so our function, the skeleton, works as it is. All right, but now imagine you didn't actually see where this function was created. There's a reason for that, right? Because I think by next week or the upper one, we are going to start treating modules. Modules is just a way of creating multiple files and importing those files using Python keywords, right? So most times functions that you are going to be using would not be created by you, but you'll be using those functions, right? So In order to actually use functions in a way that you will not get errors, you need to be able to see into what that function is expecting, so to say, right? So how do you do that? By using what we call type hints, right? So this is how it works. Like in this case, our num1, we are expecting an integer, right? So you just add a colon, then int for integer. Num2, we are expecting an integer, right? So you add a colon also, then int, right? Then our function is
It's
returning
remain 5 minutes.
remaining 5 minutes, have you? All right, so let me quickly round up this, then I'm going to end this session. I think I have less than, say, maybe a minute to round up. All right, so our function is returning multiplication of num1 and num2, which is an integer also. So what we can do is, in front of that bracket, we can put this hyphen and greater than sign and put int. So what this means is, we are expecting an integer as the first number, we are expecting an integer as the second parameter, and our function is outputting an integer. So now watch what happens when anybody is trying to use our function. So let me do multiply number, then this. The moment anybody try and overs inside that function, you can see it is helping that person already by saying, oh, I'm expected to pass in two parameters, num1 and num2. The first parameter has to be an integer, which is coming from what I did here. The second one has to be an integer also, which is coming from what I did here. Then the result is what? An integer, right? So that is how you can generate a type int for your functions, right? Then the last one in here is docstrings, right? So docstrings is just a way of explaining what your function is doing. So it goes beyond just creating a logic with your int, your string, and whatnot, right? Now you're actually explaining what your function is doing. So how is that one? How can you create that one, or how does it work? Inside that your function, you generate 3 quotations, like so. Then if I tap enter, so in between that quotation, then you can now type in the description of that function. So in here I can just say this function multiplies two numbers together. You can even say maybe num1 and num2, right? Now watch what happens when I try to hover or click inside that function. You can see it says this function multiplies two numbers together, num1 and num2, right? So that's why I said the next step is is a very interesting method or a concept, but it is not really mandatory, but it just makes you write clean and clear functions, right? And also it's a way of passing a message to either yourself or whoever is going to be using your function going forward, right? So these ones, we call it type hints, sort of like you're hinting somebody. Then this one is called doc strings. Yeah, so that's that about functions. So I'm going to be ending this session right now, then I'm going to be creating another one. So for the second session, we are just going to round up functions, then we are going to move to GitHub, then we'll call it a day, right? So in the Google Meet right now, I'm seeing let me see first. I'm seeing how many persons online. With myself, I'm seeing 6. Let people try. So I'm seeing 6. So please just wait for me in the group, right? So we can start on time and finish on time, right? In less than, say, maybe a minute, I'm going to create another link, then I'm going to drop in the group. So please, immediately you see that link, just click to join, because we are not waiting. Once it is 1 minute after the stipulated time, we are going to start, right? So remember, in the next session, we are going to cover Lambda function and also GitHub. We are going to be creating an account on GitHub. All right. So yeah. So that's basically that. See you guys in the next session. So just wait for me in the group, please. Yeah. Bye.